Real quick, before we start this episode, there's a member of the CS community who needs a little bit of an uplift. And apologies for those of you watching on YouTube. I just got back from a run. I'm uncoiffed, but I wanted to get this into this episode just to get it out there. For those longtime listeners, you have maybe you've listened to episode 1 of this podcast featuring none other than Mickey Powell. Awesome episode. He's our resident generative AI expert. He posted on LinkedIn about 2 subsequent very important losses in his family. And I wanted to basically let everyone know that I've linked to that post in the show notes. If you would engage with Mickey and read through his post and just send him some love. He and his family need support. There's also a link to contribute if you so wish. I really want us to band together and support someone that needs our help at the moment. So go engage with that post. Now back to the show. Well, should we talk about CS for a little bit?
You didn't want to make this like the Halloween Alex and Lane show instead of the Digital CS podcast?
I mean, we can totally do that. Like how would you digitally approach Halloween? And once again, welcome to the Digital Customer Success Podcast with me, Alex Turkovich. So glad you could join us here today and every week as I seek out and interview leaders and practitioners who are innovating and building great scaled CS programs. My goal is to share what I've learned and to bring you along with me for the ride so that you get the insights that you need to build and evolve your own digital CS program. If you'd like more info, want to get in touch or sign up for the latest updates, go to digitalcustomersuccess.com. And if you have a question or commentary to be used in an upcoming episode, call us and leave a message at 512-222-7381. For now, let's get started. Hello and welcome to episode 23 of the Digital Customer Success Podcast. This is the second week in a row we've done 2 episodes. For a couple of reasons. First is I've got a bunch in the backlog and I want to get them out because they shouldn't be sitting on shelves. They should be in your ears, as they say. I don't know if they say that. The second reason is because last week I had the great pleasure of not only attending the Gainsight Pulse Encore event in Austin, but also sharing the stage with my guest today, which is Lane Holt. We spent about 45 minutes, half an hour at the conference talking about digital customer success. And so I felt it only appropriate that we get her not only on the podcast, but get her episode released this week, kind of in tangent to the Gainsight Pulse Encore event that happened last week. So this is a great conversation. If you know about Lane, you know. That she's been at Gainsight for a long time, I think like 6-7 years. She was a CSM for a long time. And I think about 3 years ago was tapped to really start to figure out what this digital CS thing was for Gainsight. And so it's obviously a huge role. They're doing some really impressive things, as you will have probably gathered from some previous episodes with one of her team members, Erin Hatton, who was on, as well as the Nick and Kelly episode. So Gainsight is doing some really cool things in terms of capturing who their personas are in-app and building motions that are specifically tailored to those personas. So had a lot of fun with Lane. It's always great talking with her, and she's been a huge help for me in my own journey in digital CS and my role in the practice. So I hope that you please enjoy this conversation with Lane Holt of Gainsight, because I sure did.
All right, what's the CS thing we want to talk about today?
I don't know. Maybe something digital. I mean, I wanted to have you on the show, obviously, because you are a legend among digital. You're actually probably the one who's been doing digital CS officially as digital CS, probably the longest of anyone I know. Is that fair to say?
I try to be humble about it. I don't know. Like, there's some other people that I know out there who have been doing similar things. Maybe not calling it digital CS. They've been doing a lot. Like, I remember when we first started doing this here at Gainsight, I had known some names for a while because like I had even talked to them when I was at my last company, trying to figure out how we do this programmatic CS thing. And but there were like 3 or 4 people I called up when I took in this role about 2.5, 3 years ago now. I said, "Tell me what you're
Hmm.
doing. Tell me how you do
Yeah.
it." Which is how we're all doing it, right? We have to learn from each other. And
Right.
one of the greatest things about digital customer success is I've never ran into someone that said, "No, I'm not going to tell you." Right? They want to
Right.
share.
Exactly.
There's no like, this
Exactly.
is my proprietary information. No, they're willing to share it because it's something that the community around it, because I feel like it's really pushing that edge of where we need to go. The
Hmm.
community just wants to lock arms and help each other grow.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's the whole reason why I started this whole show is because, there's a lot of questions about it, but there's also no shortage of people who are more than willing to share and
Mhm.
willing to talk about it and sharing best practices and stuff like that, which is cool. I mean, that's that's been a wonderful thing to tap into for sure. Um, and so, given that you've been doing it a while, obviously, one of the things that I ask all of my guests is basically what their elevator pitch of digital CS is, right? And because it does vary, but I'm very curious to get your kind of elevator pitch of digital CS because you live it in a very unique way, doing it at a CSP.
Mhm. Yeah. The elevator pitch for digital customer success. Oh, I gotta. You sent me this, and I was like, I feel like my typical elevator pitch isn't the right one anymore because everyone's using it, right? Which it's typically
Right.
like digital customer success is not a segment; it's a strategy. But when you kind of
Right.
peel that back of like, what does that actually mean? Is it goes back to some of the Gainsight values, right? One of the Gainsight values that we have is success for all. And that's where I really stay grounded in digital customer success because in the idea of success for all, it is success for our customers, success for our coworkers, our employees, our company, our investors, and I always throw in success for our families, right? And
Yeah.
so when I think about digital customer success, it is kind of embodying all of those, right? How are we creating success for our customers, our CSMs, our other coworkers, our business, and our investors? And we're doing it in a way that is right for where they're at, right? So delivering the message at the right time for the right user through the right channel. And that
Hmm.
becomes how digital customer success underpins so much, right? Because when you think of that strategy versus segmentation, then digital customer success allows you to incorporate the fact that a CSM might still have to reach out in different segments, but
Sure.
it doesn't negate the need for digital customer success to help tell someone you need to reach out
Yeah.
or
Right.
enabling the user to be able to reach out as well.
Hmm.
I know I gave you
Yeah.
like a 5 minute elevator pitch. Sorry,
This is great. I
we
mean,
were going
that was a good
50
ride.
floors instead of six. So
I've had some longer ones. We've gone 100 floors before. I do like that, and I do like that element of just kind of enablement. I like to say that we like to make CSMs look good. Like we want to make you look good in what you do, and the family element is an interesting one to tie in as well.
and
Um,
as you see digital customer success evolve, it's not just for the CSM anymore, right? We want to make the CSM
mm,
look good, but some of the work
yeah.
that my team's doing is also helping the professional services team look good, helping the support team look good, the account
Hmm.
management team look good, right? And so it's starting to really encompass that entire customer life cycle. And then it's also helping the customer look good or the user look good to their boss, right? Oh,
Yeah.
did you know you did XYZ this quarter? Awesome, right? Being able to provide that value back to the customer for them to trumpet to their internal stakeholders as well.
Plus, we in CS we're collecting so much data from so many different places, and that puts us in a very unique position where we can then disseminate that data to people in ways that make it effective. One surprising kind of thing that we did that provided a ton of value was our support team was having a hard time getting into like some of our license expiry data and stuff like that. And we were just like, oh, well, we've got it all. We'll just pump out a report on a regular basis out of Gainsight, and there you go. And ever since then, every month I get like another email that says, hey, can you add me to this report? I'm like, so I'm just going to send it to y'all.
Yeah. All right. So I've gone back and listened to very many of your podcasts, prepping for this,
Yeah.
re-listening to some of them. And I know you
Mm,
say like there's so much data, but I want to make sure like we don't scare anyone off, right? If someone's sitting
right.
out there going, I don't have data, or I don't have access to the data that I want, like one of my big things this year has been lack of access to data or inaccurate or like incomplete contact data should not hinder you from being able to do digital customer success. And one of the ways we've approached that is being able to use your digital customer success motions to improve your data, right?
Yeah.
And I know you've had Aaron on, so plug Aaron into the show notes and link to that podcast. Aaron's on my team and he's been doing
Yeah.
a fabulous job along with other team
He's
members as
amazing.
well. Suruthi
Mhm.
Mala, she's on my team based in India. She's doing an awesome work there as well. And one of the things that we've really tried to start to do is say, hey, we don't have all the right data, but what can we do about that? Right? So we have certain data that we can start sending a welcome email. Great. Hey, you signed up for your account. Here's welcome to Gainsight. Here's things you need to know. Or we can send a newsletter, right? You just need an email address for that. And with newsletters, people will unsubscribe. Yes, we don't want a huge unsubscribe rate, but if you start to see that people aren't opening it, you're not hitting the right target audience, right? So then you can start using that data to identify where you're at. And then being the step that we took this year was now, hey, tell us who you are. Right? We do that in the application, but you could also do that over a survey as well. And that's another step to cleaning up your data. Kind of an interim step for us is for our pooled CS model, at least, twice a year we send an email like, hey, here's the things you need to know. Well, every month we send an email that says, here's the things you need to know for this month. But then twice a year we append to it the contacts that we have, the core contacts. And we say, hey, are these right? And we have about a 64% account response rate. So if you have 100 accounts, 64 of them had at least one person respond and say, update this. No, this is right. You're good to go, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're using our digital CS motions to improve our contact data.
Yeah, which is so great. Yeah. When I first kind of saw that modal pop up, I got really excited. And I told Aaron this too. I got super excited just because it's just a really great way of figuring out who. So I was interested from a digital CS perspective because it's like, oh, that's a great way of figuring out who, who your users are, and what kind of motions that you push that way. But also, it was an interesting kind of way of. It felt endearing in a way, like, oh, there's probably somebody on the other end that really wants to know.
Yeah. It was nice because it also validated some of the beliefs that we had around who's in our platform and the types of users in our platform. And it helps us make better decisions when someone says, hey, I want to send this survey to this type of person in the application. And we're able to go, they're not there. Right. So let's find another way to get it. Or they say, hey, let's send it over email. And we're like, your response rate's not very good. Guess what? They're actually in the application. Let's send it there.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I want to take a step back here for a second.
I know we went full speed ahead. Sorry,
we went straight forward, but there's some interesting things, kind of probably some tie-ins here. That well, first off, I did notice that are you from the St. Louis area, or you just spent some time in the St. Louis area?
I spent the first 21 years of my life in St. Louis.
Okay. Cool. I'm from Rolla, just down the road.
Oh, Rolla. I know.
Oh,
Missouri S&T now.
That's the right reaction.
Yeah. It's the only thing there, Missouri S&T. It's just a college town.
Yeah, I still call it UMR though, because it's always UMR. Yeah, it's basically one of those towns that is about 60,000 people when classes are in, and it's like 10,000 when there aren't.
Yeah. I grew up in the St. Charles area. I was out in O'Fallon, Missouri. Zumwalt West graduate. If anyone from St. Louis area is listening,
nice.
And then
you guys always kicked our butts in band competitions.
Oh yeah. Do you remember the one? I don't know if did you do the one in? I spent 1 year in band. My brother spent 4. There was one in Washington. Like you had to like march up or like there was this giant hill, and no one
Mm-hmm.
marched up it, but our band director made
Nope.
us. Every
That's
year we
brutal.
marched
That's a
that
big
hill.
hill. That's a
Yeah,
huge hill. Yeah.
yeah,
That's brutal.
yeah.
So you grew up, St. Louis area, and then I think your first kind of professional life was marketing, right?
It was.
You have a solid marketing background.
Yeah. So I graduated in May 2008, which is not a good time to
Yeah.
graduate college, right?
No. Mm-mm.
Um, I submitted tons of resumes and applications, and I had
Wow.
one company call me back. There's this very small university in Phoenix called the University of Advancing Technology. Having never lived outside of Missouri, I packed up the car and we drove to Phoenix. So I
Wow.
started there, and I was what we called a national liaison. So basically, I went from college fair to college fair. I was a road warrior, trying to talk to these high school kids who are into technologies and things like that about why you should go to school there.
Mm.
I made it 6 months in that role before I was like, this is not what I'm looking for. And they were opening up a role in marketing to do social media marketing. So I was like, hey, you guys were reading my blog as I was applying, and I know you know that I know how to do this. Love to jump in. So one thing though that I didn't realize in taking that role is I was also going to be doing email marketing. So a lot
Mm-hmm.
of emails through different platforms to high school students say, hey, are you interested? Here's some things that you need to know. This is what we're about. This is why you should come here. You can spend 12 months out of the year outside. Maybe 3 of those you'll actually only be in a pool because it's so hot and that's the only thing you're going to do outside, right? I spent 3 years there. It was a good 3 years. I learned a lot. But then I
Mm-hmm.
realized like the growth wasn't there for me. So I just moved through some connections. I moved all the way out to the DC area and did some social media marketing there before that organization did a round of layoffs. And I was part of that, which was, when you're going through it, you never say that was the best thing that happened. But once you get
Sure.
through it, you're like, that was the best thing that could happen. Then I moved here to
Mm-hmm.
Austin and it started contracting full time for a company here. Spent 5 years with them total between contract and full time. I was doing social media marketing, email marketing, ad buys, trying to do the marketing analysis on it. And then I had our VP of CS at the time. She's like, hey, actually, sorry, my boss came to me and was like, I think our VP of CS is going to try and take you away from me. Like, that
Oh yeah.
seems funny. So I went to her and I said, hey, I heard this rumor that you want me on your team. And she's like, I do. Like, oh, okay. And so I went over to her team. And then it was a really good, 3 years there in that role, learned a lot, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that was the first foray into this digital customer success thing. And I was always opposed to calling it tech touch. And everyone wanted to call it tech touch. I'm like, oh, it just sounds abrasive. So we called it
It does.
programs. We
Yeah.
called it programs. And so I was
Yeah.
responsible for, when I exited, they had 70,000 in their long tail. So I was responsible
Mm-hmm.
for our adminning our Gainsight platform, making sure emails went out. I ran our NPS program, and just doing all of those cool little things there, right? Being able to trial and test things quick and pivot. And it's nice if you had a nice funnel of customers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it can be hard when you're like, I have 100 customers to trial this on. You can't pivot as quickly. When you're like, I have a
Yeah.
1,000 new customers this month and I want to see if this resonates, you can move a lot quicker.
Yeah.
And so that's fun. And then I came over here to Gainsight, started out as a CSM, worked through the CSM ladder into leadership. And then, like I said, about 2.5, 3 years ago, Kelly and Ashvin came to me and they said, hey, there's this like digital thing that we think we need to try. And how do we service more of our customers in a scale fashion? And so it started out as a pooled segment. And then very quickly we went, wait a second, there's so much here that like benefits all of our other customers. Like, why not do it? And that's where it took us about maybe like 3 months after I started the pooled role to say like, we're doing this across the board.
Mm-hmm.
We started, it was me and one person, like half of a person who was doing like our in-app engagements. And so
Yep.
now my team is, let's see, counting myself, we're 9 people strong. And we focus on all of the things in-app and email. We help the pooled CS team kind of has a feedback loop to my team now. Hey, we're doing this. We're seeing some success in it. How do we help make it more programmatic? And so we have that feedback loop into my team now.
That's cool.
So that's how
So,
you go
and
from
this,
making tweets to doing digital customer success.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's such a cool journey, and you part of what I love about it is because people. I mean, it's no secret that people come into CS from all walks of life, right? They come into it from, I don't know, sales or, marketing in your case. There's some more technical roles that find their way into CS, and there's a home for a lot of different people there. But I think, and especially when it comes to digital CS, like that, I feel like that marketing background and that foothold that you had in email marketing was probably the thing that teed you up for this in a kind of a perfect way, because you had that baseline understanding of like, this is how to engage with a customer base, and this is what not to do, and this is how to correctly use tokens and stuff like that.
And it's also helpful too because when someone looks at an email and they're like, "Man, we didn't have a really good click through rate." Okay, but what's your open rate? So because
Yeah.
if you miss that piece of it, right? My click through rate's not
Mm-hmm.
great, and my open rate's not great. Well, your click through rate's not great because no one's looking at the links to click them. So we also look
Right.
at click to open. So of your percentage of
Mm.
those who opened it, how many people clicked it? Because that's really going to tell you, like, then is your content hitting the mark? And if you don't have a very high open rate, then you need to fix your subject line and your preview text. And those are like core
Right.
like email marketing pieces that
Yeah.
sometimes get overlooked. And being in my role, I get asked all like, what do you look for to bring someone to your team? Or who should I like, what qualities should I look for in someone to
Mm.
run this program? And I tend to say like there's three things that you need. Someone
Mm-hmm.
who understands marketing metrics, like email marketing
Mm-hmm.
metrics, someone who
Mm-hmm.
understands what customer success is and kind of, why of that, and then someone who understands how data relates to data.
Yeah.
Because then you're able to say, oh, I have this data set over here and I have this data set over here. How can I get them to match together to really
Mm-hmm.
get what I need? Because you
Mm-hmm.
might have a list of customers on this page and you might have usage data over here, and you have to figure out how to connect them, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times our ops teams will do that, but not all organizations have an ops team that can do
Right.
that, or even have an ops team in general, especially if it's a smaller
Mm-hmm.
startup or a fast growth or an early stage company. And so by
Sure.
looking to have kind of those three things, and they don't have to have a deep understanding of all of them, right? Maybe they're deep in one thing, but understand the others. And then they can
Mm-hmm.
really start growing. And, 2.5 years ago, that was a unicorn. Like when we started building out the
Right.
team, it was really hard to find that person. But we found like there's beginning to get more because people are going, wait, I have to understand this. And so people are leaning into it to really start to measure what is the success of my digital motions. And they're starting to see
Mm-hmm.
like, I need those marketing pieces. And it's not just sending this email to market this thing. I also need to make sure it's driving a success for that customer.
Yeah, exactly. And to that point exactly, making sure that you're sending, the right types of comms to
Mm-hmm.
the right, not just the right company, but the right contact as well,
Yes.
because the same kind of outcome based messaging that you want to get out might look differently depending on whether you're sending it up to, your C-level contact or your executive level contact versus your admins and all of that.
Yeah, and it also depends on the person, right? So that one of the things that as you were saying that made me think like a user's outcome is very different than what a decision maker's outcome is for your product. Let's take
Hmm.
Gainsight. An end user's logging in if
Hmm.
it's a CSM, they want to understand their book of business, they want to manage their risk, they want to log meeting notes, right? The
Yeah.
exec wants to make sure that they are being able to see the reduction in churn. They're wanting to make
Yeah.
sure that they're growing their net dollar retention. And so if I were to ask an exec, what is your goal with Gainsight? It's going to be those things. But if I
Yeah.
ask you as an admin, what's your goal with Gainsight? You're gonna be like, I need to make sure the rules run correctly to provide an accurate representation of our customers to our users. And a user, if we ask
Hmm.
that question, they're like, I need to manage, my goal is to be able to proactively manage my book of business, right? So
Yeah.
three different types of goals for each user there.
Hmm. Yeah. It's huge. And I think it's something that we kind of overlook. There's like a one and done, send and forget kind of mentality sometimes that goes along with email marketing, but just notifications in general. I do want to circle back to one element that you said with regards to your interplay between the pool team and your team, and I'm curious as to when you think about the digital motions that you have in place, kind of how much of it is focused on purely customer facing stuff and how much of it is like notifications for the internal teams.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I get it. The nice thing is that we also have an ops team. So we have a CS ops team,
Yeah.
and then we have my scale team, and we have a couple other teams that sit in ops and scale. But we're kind of sister teams, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give an example of something that will help us with that. So in June this year, we launched end user NPS, right? We had and some you had NPS because you were an admin for a while, right? So it wasn't anything new to you, but we weren't
Yep.
getting our end users' perspective. So in June, we launched end user NPS. And so my team designed the in-app survey, designed the email follow-ups for that, and designed that process, and we implemented it. And after a couple months, the CS team went, wait, we need a score for these. And they're like, Lane, build a health score for that. I'm like, that's outside of my team. So then we went, hey, ops team, this team needs that. Can you go build it? And so they built out the requirements and then it was built. So a lot of my team's things are geared towards the end users and the users
Mm-hmm.
of our platform. But there are ones where, we are working with the pool team, say, how do we do a digital business EBR or digital business
Yeah.
review? Right? And so that's very different because it is partly building that motion for the pool team and building that experience for the end user. That is one where you can't build one without the other. And so
Mm-hmm.
when we have to build both of them together, that typically sits in my team. But when I think about, one of my team sub teams or our pods on my team focuses on onboarding. A lot of those motions right now is just how do we make it easier for the professional services team, right? And so it's taking their motions. So it's not even doing notifications for them. It's taking their motions, figuring out how we do it digitally. But we're also building in a piece of that, say, hey, here's where you might be off track, right? So I would say probably like 75% of my team's work right now is focused on the customer or the end user. Maybe about 25% is focused on like the notifications and tasks to the other teams.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, we've gotten into into an interesting scenario where I don't think you and I have talked about this actually, where we're starting to pull our professional services teams into Gainsight and actually running projects as success plans out of Gainsight, and
Nice.
that has been a really interesting challenge because I mean, there's a square peg round hole scenario a little bit, but Gainsight's been up to the challenge, which is good. But it's been amazing pulling the post sale teams into Gainsight a little bit more holistically, where we're running onboarding projects
Mm-hmm.
within the tool, we're running ongoing customer PS engagements within the tool as well, and that's really helping to build out the picture, not just for. I think one area where it's really going to have an impact for us is not just the accounts that have an assigned CSM, but those other accounts where there isn't a CSM assigned that we are monitoring, quote unquote, digitally, but there is some presence there from a PS perspective. I think that's huge.
A lot of our team's work this year has been around like helping a customer before there's risk, right?
Mm,
And so helping guide that journey or that end user perspective. As we start to look into next year, it's going to be a little bit more around, hey, where's a risk and how do we use the digital tools to help go like mitigate that risk, not go around it, but
mm-hmm,
being
mm-hmm,
able to say. So one of the nice things about how we help design the pooled CS team is that each CSM also gets a project to work on. So like, yes, they have a whole group of customers that they're all working on, but then each CSM, like we have one who was focused on how do we do a digital business review. And we have one that was
mm-hmm.
around how do you identify customers who are struggling with the same thing. And then another person was working on, what were they working on? It's escaping me right now. But what that allowed us to do is it allowed them to be able to spend some of their time, dedicate some of their time on that project, say, hey, okay, here's how we would solve for this. But then
Mm.
after one was doing office hours, that was the other one. After we got that project to a place that was sustainable and repeatable, then we built out the automation around it, right? And so that was one of the ways that we took and put a person on it, worked on it, created a process, created a procedure, made it repeatable, and then we moved it on. And then sometimes if we were 2 quarters in and it still wasn't into a process, we rotated the projects. So if you, like, this
Mm-hmm.
is one of the things I've always been big on. Imagine you're the CSM that's responsible for risk and that's all you ever dealt
Yeah.
with. I know me, I would get burnt out if I'm always talking to people who are mad or upset about something.
Sure.
And so that was one
Totally.
of the reasons why we also like to rotate them, because you got a different flavor of
Mm-hmm.
it. But then it also helped each of those team members grow as well. So they understood how to mitigate risk. They also understood how to grow digital EBRs. They understood how to run office hours. And so it was a nice little loop within them to be able to say, okay, I had kind of my tour of duty at this, and this is what I took from it. And we take learnings from that and we build on them.
That's so cool. I love that from a career pathing perspective too, and a career building, skills building perspective, because, the more exposure that an individual can get to different aspects of the business and different aspects of the team, the better. You build yourself a whole, a well-rounded team. So that's cool. What you mentioned digital EBR, EBR, QBR,
Mm-hmm.
EBR?
Business review. Just put business
Yeah,
review.
the BR,
DBR.
the
DBR.
DBR. What does I've never been exposed to one of those because we have an amazing CSM at Gainsight. Shout out to Nikki. But what does that experience look like
Yeah.
for Gainsight customers?
It's it's ever evolving, right? So
Yeah,
what we say here, if someone comes back and listens to this in a year, it's going to be different, right?
totally.
Um, how we've designed it right now is you get a survey before the business review. You take the survey and then we build a deck around it, right? We're working on
Mm-hmm.
automating more of that through success snapshots. We're getting pretty close. We're like almost there. And then we send you that deck, but then we do a group business review, right? So you have your deck that's custom to you, but all of us have been on business reviews. There's an aspect that's custom to us, and then there's like the let's talk about moving forward, and it's a little bit more generic, but it's like, how do teams work together? How does a company work with you?
Mm-hmm.
And so we bring a group of them together as like a shared business review where we talk more
Cool.
about those forward facing things. And it also allows the customers to kind of tag off of each other and piggyback and
Mm-hmm.
grow. And that conversation becomes more robust instead of just
Mm-hmm.
you talking to a Gainsight CSM.
Yeah. That's cool. Is it the same cohort of customers every time, or
Mm-hmm.
does it kind of rotate? Like, do they get to know each other?
I don't think we've made it through a whole year, so we can't say they're
Yeah.
in the same
So don't
cohort.
know.
But we're growing that, and so
That's cool.
I have made the recommendation that we try and group similar customers together. We just came off CXO Summit last week, and I realized like we do also need to
Mm-hmm.
make sure like we're not putting them with their competitors, right? One of the nice
Yeah,
things about CXOs, we ask about competitors because we don't want you in a small group where you don't feel comfortable talking or sharing because your
of
competitors
course.
there. And so that's something that we
Yeah.
also have to make sure that we put into this as well.
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough. We've struggled with that a little bit because we do have very strong, partner relationships, and we have a lot of partners who not only sell but service our software on our behalf. And so, in the past we've tried to get partners to help us with certain things, but it's always hard to get a couple of partners in the room together. That can get a little bit awkward.
Yeah, I can
Um,
imagine.
yeah. You mentioned CXO Summit that just happened
Mm-hmm.
last week at the time of recording. And it kind of ties into another question that I had for you with regards to, I guess, some of the common questions that you answer, because I want to give you a little bit of a platform to maybe answer those questions, maybe in a one to many fashion. Hey, look at that. Um, So there's maybe a little bit less repetition. But what are those things that people come to you with on a repeated basis that you find yourself repeating things? I'm sure you're more than happy to do it, but what are you saying over and over again?
Yeah. Uh, Common questions are, how do I start? Right?
Yeah.
How do I start? And it's kind of a game of inches when you start, right?
Hmm.
Because I worked with someone once. I'll tell another little story here. I worked with someone once. I said, you start with the customer life cycle. What is your customer life cycle? And let's start breaking pieces off. And
Yep.
like a week and a half later, they came back to me and they're like, all right, here's the 3-year life cycle. And here are all of the email touch points that we're going to have over those 3 years. And I went, time out. You just made a
Yep.
big assumption that your customers are going to last 3 years. What's the average lifetime of your customer? And they're like, oh, it's not 3 years. It's shorter.
Hmm.
Great.
Hmm.
Now, also what's going to change in 3 years? Because if you just build out this huge journey and put it into Journey Orchestrator and execute on it, your customers are in there and you have to stop it. Right. And so
Yep.
when you think about starting at the customer journey, this is my one piece of advice to everyone when they're like, where do I start? Take your customer journey and identify 4 or 5 milestone moments, and then
Hmm.
peel it back into, what do we want the customer to experience or get out of this, and what do we want to get out of it, right? And then you
Hmm.
start to see, how do you deliver on that. And that's what we did. We took
Yeah.
our customer life cycle and we said, okay, what are the first few moments that we want to be able to do? And it's like things like, for us, it was like a cadence call, right? Do we need to have a cadence call with the customers in our pooled segment? Yes, no, maybe so, right? But when we looked at it, we said, what are we doing in these cadence calls? And every time it was,
Yeah.
here are the upcoming events. Here's what you need to know about the product. All right, do you have any technical
Yeah.
questions? And I'm like, okay, I
Yeah.
can take two out of the 3 of them and put that in an email, right? And then it goes back to,
And do
let's
those customers even want a cadence call, right?
yes. And when we started talking to them, it's like, look, these were, and in most organizations, these are going to be your startup, your fast growth organizations. People are wearing multiple hats.
Mm.
And the way that we
Mm.
discussed it was, Alex, you're wearing 4 hats, right? You don't know that every second Tuesday of the month at noon that you can meet with me, right? So instead of doing that, I'm happy to meet with you. Just tell me, reach out and say, hey, I'd love to schedule 30 minutes. We'll get 30 minutes on the calendar. But in lieu of that, I'm going to send you what you need to know over email, upcoming events, product changes. And then we typically will say, have a call to action. Hey, do you want to do this? Don't forget to use your best practice sessions, right? And so that's how we first started doing that, right? So that was our first motion into, here's a life cycle moment that we're going to deliver differently, right?
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and then that's also where we got into some of the best practice sessions, right? We said, okay, here are all the things that our customers ask for best practices around. And we said, okay, let's do it in a one-to-many fashion. What does this roundtable, webinar, technical deep dive look like? And that's where we built it out. So we started identifying those first. And then that's kind of where you start. We started the account level. What are the things at the account level we want to do? And then we also talked a lot about 3 calendars. I feel like you're giving me my chance to do my Pulse presentation that I didn't get to do this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's three calendars. There's your year calendar, your January to December. For Gainsight, in March and April, you're going to get Pulse information. Go register for Pulse because
Hmm.
those happen at that point in the calendar year. It doesn't matter if it's day 1 of a customer or year 5 of a customer. In March, April, you're going to get that information. So that's one calendar. The second calendar to look at is the account lifecycle calendar. There's the day the account signs up. That's day 1. And there are certain things you're going to get. You're going to get a welcome email there. You're going to get onboarding information there. You're not going to get that again in year 2 unless you buy a new product.
Right.
And then that's where we
Right.
go from there. And then there's user lifecycle. Your day 1 in my platform as an end user might be your account's 250th day, but you still need to know
Hmm.
what to do on your first day in the platform.
For
And so
sure.
when you look at those 3 life cycles, we did a lot in our first year and a half, 2 years of digital success on that account life cycle, right? What do you need to know? Newsletters, things like that. This is the year that we've really started focusing on that end user life cycle. What do you need to
Hmm.
understand as an end user as you're navigating it? Some cool things that are coming out. I'm not going to give any dates or anything, But we are getting ready to launch a possible knowledge center bot on CS for end users. For new end users,
Cool.
imagine like it's my first day in. What do I need to know? And you're getting touches of that with that persona survey. What's your role?
Mm-hmm.
What department are you in? What are you trying to accomplish? You're getting touches of that. But now imagine being able to take that from your first day and then build
Yeah.
out the next steps. Hey, you're a CSM. Great. Here's what you need to know. Oh, wait, you're not a CSM. You're a sales. You're an AE or an AM. This is what you
Mm-hmm.
need to know, right? How do I do my renewal forecast? How do I manage my renewal CTA, right? So there's different paths that we're starting to put you on. But we could not have gotten here if we didn't start with that account lifecycle. So
Right.
that's where we
Yeah.
balance those out. So first thing I would say, the question I always answer, start with your life cycle. Know what you want your life cycle to look like and build back from there.
And there's always an excuse not to do something. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
always going to be an excuse not to do something. Like I don't have the right, contact information. I don't have this and I don't have that. And it's just like, well, what can you do? I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
operate in a largely on-prem kind of
Yeah.
environment where most of our customers are on-prem, and so we don't get to see a lot of this stuff that we would in a SaaS environment. That's changing because we're evolving into that, but so it's been a lot of like, okay, we can't see this, but how can we still identify who these certain people are and how to target those certain people? And
Mm-hmm.
that's been a fun challenge of like using the community and logins and all that kind of
Yes.
fun stuff, which is interesting. But I love that in terms of the three different life cycles, and especially the end user life cycle. There's so much attention being put on like onboarding, like customer onboarding,
Mm-hmm.
that the end user onboarding goes by the wayside.
Yeah. And the reason we started looking at that this year was because adoption at the account level is measured by end user adoption, right?
Hmm.
So what we look at for adoption at the account level is what percentage of your users are healthy active users, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, now
Yeah.
I know what I need to go do. I need to make sure my users are healthy active users. So now, how
Right.
do I get them to stay in the platform, right? How do I get them to return? What makes them sticky? What 2 to 3 things do I need them to do in their first login to make sure they come back tomorrow? Right.
Yeah.
So that's now where we're
So
at and what we're looking at.
I love it. I love it. Well, I do feel like we could go on forever, but
Maybe
it
we do a
is
part two.
unfortunate. I think we just should do a part two. Yeah, we'll do a part two. But I do want to ask you a couple other kind of
Yeah.
closeout questions, which is something that I ask everybody. The first one is like, what's your content diet? What do you pay attention to on a regular
Oh
basis?
man, I since I heard this question the first time, I'm like, man, I need to up my content diet. But I am pleasantly surprised in all of them that I am not the only one who says like I don't read a lot of business books. Like for every
Yeah,
like 5
you're
fiction
not
books, and like I'm into
right.
historical fiction. So for every like 5 historical fiction books read, like I might read a business book or something. My
Right.
husband at one
Yeah.
point told me like I need like in my heart of hearts I'm like European or English. Like there's something about like historical fiction, especially like the World War II era, like really gets me. Like
Oh yeah,
the Rose Code. I read that book. I was like, oh man, I love this one.
that's cool. Yeah.
Um, but I'm also started listening to one of the things that my dad instilled in me growing up was like the value of money, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
one of the podcasts I started listening to recently is called Girls That Invest. It's one lady, they're
Ooh.
like 2 New Zealand women in their late 20s. One now lives in Canada, but it's nice that like they just kind of break things down, right?
Uh huh.
And so I listened to a
Yeah.
podcast. I finished it up this morning around when Instacart and Klaviyo IPO'd, and it was like breaking
Yeah.
down like, does this mean it's the end of the IPO drought? Why would you invest in something? One of the things that they said stuck to me was like, if the CEO came to you and said, like, you can run this company, like, or you can buy the whole thing, like, would I do it? And like, if you wouldn't do it, then you probably shouldn't even invest in any of it.
Amen. Yeah.
So
There you go.
it was interesting. But don't take any of my
Yeah.
advice. I'm not here to give financial advice to you. So
I do feel like there's a big portion of of the population that didn't get a really strong financial education, other than like learning how to balance a checkbook, like in high school or something like that,
Yeah.
And we live now in a time where there's no shortage of financial education, and it can be really hard to pick the good stuff from the bad stuff. So I appreciate a drop like that. That's cool.
I still wish that in high school they taught me how to do my taxes. Like,
Yeah.
that'd still be nice.
Don't go there.
Couple more months, it'll be tax season. Ooh.
It will be. Yep. It will be indeed. Well, that's cool. So having your finger on the pulse of, no pun intended, or maybe pun intended, of digital CS, who would you call out as doing cool stuff? Like who are the people that you're like, oh yeah, they've built some great stuff and I'm really proud of them?
Two of the people that I like to always give a shout out to, because I learned a lot from them early on. Melissa Allen at Okta. She did a spotlight for us back in August, and just some of the things that they're doing right around, variant emails and getting in front of different risks and things like that was really cool. Alteryx is doing some cool stuff. Jordan Barker over there. And then Gong.io, like their combination of digital success and community is really cool. Several people over there, Sonam, Nisha, really love what they're doing. And they, it's also nice to like give shout outs to other women in tech that are doing it. So Melissa and Sonam and Nisha really doing some phenomenal work. And also Carrie at Qualtrics. I saw her last week, and always cool to see what they're doing and see how she's pushing that edge there.
Cool. Yeah. Well, selfishly, this is these are always
it's your source list
for me. It's my source list. It totally is. But it's it's good. It's good. I love it. Okay. Finally, you're obviously on LinkedIn. But how can people engage with you? Is it LinkedIn? Is it other places, Gainsight related places?
Yeah. LinkedIn is a good bet, always is. Also the Gainsight community.gainsight.com. You can find me there. You can also find that one of the things that we're really big on this year and we're pushing on the team is build in public. So anything that my team does that's more innovative, they post how they've done it on our community. So some really cool, like technical things in there that you can find and learn. They're always also happy to connect as well. You could probably find me on other social medias, but I do have them kind of locked down a little bit because if you spent I can't believe we made it this far in the podcast and I haven't mentioned my kids. But you always know I find some way to connect them in, and so but they're 7 and 4, and so I try to keep them out of the limelight, at least their photos,
keep it on
too
lock.
much.
Yep.
So
yeah. That's good. That's good parent stuff right there. Well, I've appreciated this hour. I always love talking to you, and you were so instrumental in helping me get up to speed back in the day as well. So just a huge shout out to you and everything you do for the community. And we're going to have you back for sure.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. I know this was a long time coming. We tried earlier and, parents in summer, and they just didn't happen. And then
happens. This summer sucked. It was real bad
rough.
summer.
Well, let's not end on this note. I mean, it was rough. And then to wrap it up, the week my kids started school, I got COVID. So it was, but we are in the fall swing of it. Events happening, Pulse Encore Austin next week, and then let's ride into the holidays.
That's right. Just smooth sailing.
That's right.
Finish the quarter out. Well, thanks again.
I'll catch up with you later, Alex.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Digital Customer Success Podcast. If you like what we're doing, consider leaving us a review on your podcast platform of choice. It really helps us to grow and to provide value to a broader audience. You can view the Digital Customer Success definition word map and get more details about the show at digitalcustomersuccess.com. My name is Alex Turkovich. Thanks again for joining, and we'll see you next time.